Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are here in Palazzo Sant'Elia in Palermo in the 12th event of, okay, some noise, okay, thank you. The 12th event of the public program of ESSE, the solo exhibition I'm having here in Fondazione Sant'Elia in Palermo. And this time we are having a Kulapat, a friend and an amazing architect that made the beginning of his career in Japan and established his studio in L.A. and New York, and is focusing mostly on art and sustainability architecture. Between the other things he's doing, everybody welcome to look online on his entire activity, the studio called WHY. And hi, Kulapat. Kulapat is in Los Angeles at the moment.
Hello, thank you, Rafael. Hello, everyone.
And when we spoke about the participation of Kulapat in the public program, which related to my show and dealing with light pollution, but not only, Kulapat came with a beautiful idea to inspire the talk, which is the title of the talk, In Price of Shadows. In Italiano, I have to mention, because we are in Italy, it's Elogio, dell'ombre, and it's a book written by Tanizaki in 1933. That means nearly 100 years ago. We're going to touch this later. Very impressive book, which I partly read, and pretty much, I would even say, like a prophecy in a way. Maybe it's a big word, but that's a big book, so I'm not afraid to use big words. Kulapat, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's Monday morning here, so I'm drinking my coffee, enjoying your conversation.
Yeah, so yeah, you want to start a bit telling a little bit about the background of our talk, and we continue from there. We prepared some questions, some topics that we can then reach later in the talk.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, thank you. It is an honor to be with you today, Rafael,
An honor to me. Thank you so much.
and I think we can start. Of course, we got to know each other as friends and creative communities, and of course, I was drawn to your work in the aspect of of the light and the imagery, right? The darkness and the visibility. I think it, of course, deals with the dichotomy of light and dark, here and now, and many other aspects. And when we started to talk about the discussion over dinners, of course, the thought of about shadow come up because of your imageries and how you work. So I was kind of drawn. I mean, of course, the book Impressive Shadows is a very influential book for me, when I was studying architecture, both in Thailand and Japan, because it really talks about, the balance of life between light and dark. But in his book, it also focusing on, the to be honest, in the beginning when I read it, I felt somewhat disappointed because it seemed to be very nostalgic and romantic about holding on to the Japanese aesthetics and Japanese traditional way of life, amidst the invasion, shall we say, or the changes that were brought about by modernization and westernization in Japan. So, but it did talk, one part which is, I think, is important for our discussion today, is about the aesthetic, that balances light and dark, that doesn't prefer one over the other, that allow us to be reminded of the other side that we don't see, right? I mean, some it's interesting because sometimes it remind me of those still life, those memento mori, that it's talked about the joys of life, but it has a sadness that reminds us that all of this will be gone, right? The death and life is always in the same painting. And the same thing with your work and also Taniguchi book, that it talks about one with the other. It's not talking about one over the other, but it's more about let's remind ourselves that these two sides of being, these two sides of life, exist as a cycle. You know, we're in a cycle. Like what we talked about, you know, as we have more technologies and control over our life and our planets, we try to control how the moon rotates around the sun. We try to minimize the nighttime, right? We try to minimize the winter time. We try to minimize things that are not pleasant to us or not useful to us or not comfortable to us. And
Useful.
so, yeah, and so that's becoming something that happens more and more, right? I think, and so in your work, you obviously bring attention to that, bring attention to the visibility of the invisible, right? The idea of duration, the idea of time, which is also not invisible, not visible. So, in my question to you, you know, I mean, I'm being dying to ask you the question too, right? Because when you work on your pictures, on your images, it deal with light and also it deal with time, right? Both of these things are invisible. So what are you trying to convey? You know, I'm also, you know, as an architect, I'm very much prefer the, you know, or, you know, kind of advocate for the invisible, which is space. You know, sometimes space and form, people like the form, people are not as focused on space, even though space is what we use, right? And space is what contain us.
You're
And so
talking. I
in
want to
your,
jump every second sentence. I let you continue, but you know,
I'm ending right now in the sense
no, no, I
that
know, no, no. I would never remember everything.
no, no, no.
I should know.
But but I just want to kind of maybe start our conversation by talking about the invisibility in your work, right? I mean, you have to convey as an art form, it has to be visible, but the content of the work seems to be the invisibility of presence. So can you
Totally.
talk about that subject?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to start with, speaking about the space and the use of the space, we continue to the idea that you just mentioned. So that's normally I like to do my shows in large scale spaces because a part of the show, because I'm working in natural darkness, in total darkness in time, I don't see anything which surrounded me. That means it's almost infinity. You know, when you see nothing, it's like you see the end of the world. You see everything. End of the world in the sense of space, void. And I used the space here, which is very high ceiling. You can see I'm in one of the rooms
Mhm.
now. Very high ceiling, in a very delicate way. Didn't use every wall I could, and I left a lot of void in the show to as void as part of the object of the artwork, exactly as you just mentioned, that the forms are part of the space, and the space is part of the forms of the object, and that would never give justice with the work if the void wouldn't be as such here. So that's one thing. So the installation I created, which is a journey, I mean the artworks are on the walls, but the space itself is also an artwork. It's an installation where you are stepping into a new dimension or a different dimension that you use to see of same realities which represented in the artworks, represented in a way that are not existing to your eyes, to our eyes, represented in a way which defined by darkness. As light define, of course, the reality, darkness define the reality in a different way in terms of color, forms, and perspective, and that's what you find here. The experience in working with the invisible is pretty intense. Since a while, I'm working with the invisible, not only with these techniques of creating with photography reality out of an existing reality, which is using the darkness as a source of light. If it's something that can be said in that context, I always use to work with the invisible. And in one of the previous exhibitions, I used the invisible of light itself. So it was an exhibition about materialization of light. To take the light as a physical entity and try and draw the light which is between the source and the object, or all what is invisible. And that's if you ask what is that for me, and this is the question you asked me, it's how
it seems like, I think you want to bring awareness to the invisible, right? Which is darkness, which is duration, which is time. Your work in some sense kind of presents that. So, which is interesting because, of course, the subject we chose to talk about is impressive shadows. And I think in this case, back to the context, that it talked about what we lose when we focus on brightness, when we focus on visibility. When we shine the light on out of it, what do we lose? We lose mystery. We lose a certain sense of aesthetic. We lose a certain sense of life. We need balance. We were just talking about, you just mentioned before that there was news that China is trying to create artificial moon, right? And we heard more and more that people are trying to extend the daytime. People are extend the summertime or other. And, on top of that, we have global warming. So it seems like the world is driving itself towards maximizing the light, maximizing the heat, maximizing the usefulness. And I think that when we look at that, I'm of course reminded by the Eastern belief in the Zen aspect of things, that we should balance yin and yang, light and dark. So in this notion, and putting your work in the context, when you show this landscape or this image, which is of course most of the time created in darkness, right? But you shown them in brightness, in typical space. Is there a problem there, or is it, what are you trying to do? Because I think, for example, if I raise, not exactly the same at all, the case of, let's say, someone like James Turrell, right, who worked very much about light as well. And there's one zero work. Right now, there's a lot of electricity assist into the work, but early on, at least the one that I come across, do not have a lot of changing lights and things like that. So you go into a dark room in an aperture and you sit there for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And once your eye adjusted, then you start to see things, right? So the work, again, I see it almost like a relational aesthetics. The work, it doesn't matter. It's about the duration you wait until you can see the work. And when you see the work, it's all an aperture with light coming through. And the longer you wait, your longer your eye adjusted, the clearer you see. So I think for me, the lesson was not whether the work is beautiful or leading something. It's about the work as a relational tool to relate back to me, as in your eyes can fool you, right? Because you didn't see anything 15 minutes ago, and now you see clear vision of what the artwork looked like. So, in that regards, what I'm saying is that are you trying to use your work to remind or make aware from the visitors certain aspect of nature or certain aspect of light that you are interested in?
Well, first, I feel that in many of the artworks, the feeling of that the work is growing on you and more details appearing also happening in the show because I'm using very low light. You can see behind. I mean, here I have a window open so you can see my face, but normally it's even darker. And the exhibition built in points of it's mostly the public is mostly in darkness like Turel, and they're looking over the light. Actually, I would turn the computer to show you something here, but maybe I do it slightly after. But when you are looking on the general view of the exhibition, you never see artworks. You just see points of light distributed in the space. And when you step in the exhibition, you see no artworks. You just see light and you are in dark, you're stepping in a dark space and you see the dots of light which coming along the different rooms and your eyes since the first room start to develop that sensibility of being in the dark and your vision becomes much more and more sensitive. And once you are arriving to a work, following the dots of light, you would get into an artwork, and that artwork would, like, I'm very honored to mention James Puel in that context, that the details of the artwork is appearing more and more. More you look, more it appears. And I think it's not only the eyes that involved in that process. I think it's the brain. We already mentioned in other circumstances that we see with the brain. Eyes is just a tool, but the tool becomes more and more sensitive to let the brain read new information. And that's for me something that is very important because we are living in a world of tools, but at the end, it's what we do with the tools.
Exactly, exactly.
And how the brain is reacting to the use of the tool and how the brain reacting to what it receives. And then the thoughts, the feelings that comes out of that process, which is somebody can laugh, somebody can cry, somebody can kiss. I had like situations here. I had a couple that where I step in to set up something in the exhibition, and I saw a couple very closely. I mean, one to each other. That makes me feel very, very. I mean, I was very happy to see that. That being sitting in front of an artwork makes them with time because it takes time to get into that illumination, to that intimacy that it's creating. And then the fact that time is a very important aspect that you have to respect. And with that time, with all the other aspects of what you just mentioned, they started to touch each other and got very close to each other, intimacy. And
Mm-hmm.
and someone else told me why I feel depressed, when I'm here, you know? And I said, well, I don't know. And somebody else said, I'm like, I see the light. I don't want to leave the exhibition. I want to stay and live here. I don't want to go back to the street. So it's you would never expect what the public would feel experiencing the journey in the exhibition and the artworks, but it's definitely related to the time you let things to grow on you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. I like the idea of that you mentioned the tools or the artwork as an opportunity to trigger to make people aware of certain aspects, both in terms of their daily life and as well as their imagined life, right? So to be able to, like what you said, the sense of intimacy, and in some funny way, art need to attract people, because if people don't pay attention to art, then it doesn't do its job, right? So it attracts people attention through its beauty, through its language, through its shocking presence, to its screaming or whatever it is. Art tend to do that, but that beauty or that shock is not the message of the art. It's just a way to engage people to look deeper, to spend more time with the art, and let that be, the tool, right? Which is interesting, because I think, going back to your thoughts about tools, which is something that I also appreciate from McLuhan, right? When he said that tools, of course, are extension of the human body, but every time I think we extended our ability through tools, which we did, through wheels, to knife, to guns, to many other tools we have created. We end up, with our brain losing part of our ability. We would not be able to run as fast because we're not relying on that. We're not exercising. We're relying on cars and wheels. We're not as good as calculation because now we use calculator. Our brain doesn't work that way, So in a way, by inventing extension of our ability, we lose our intrinsic ability, as human, which is come back to the concept of pollution and sustainability, because humans, of course, were sustainable. We always have to be sustainable, otherwise we don't sustain, we don't survive. But by way of inventing new tools, new technologies, or allow us to live better, to live longer, to live with more control over environment, we end up losing not only our ability to engage and connect with things like we used to. We also kind of come up to a breaking point that the impact we have on our environment, on our ability to connect as a human race, I think getting less and less controllable. So art has a purpose here, right? Because art is that trigger to think about. Of course, you can tell people all day long, how many advertisements and media you see about, climate change, about, global warming and other things. And people just don't pay attention until the house is on fire. I think it's just like, oh, it's someone else's problem. It's a collective problem. It doesn't bother me at this point. So I'm just gonna continue to live life as it always has been, because until the crisis happens, then we will address it. But we now know that when we actually felt when the house is on fire, meaning the whole planet is on fire, then it's not possible to do anything. So in that note, in your work, you in some ways, I'm not sure whether it's intentional or not, but you point attention to light pollution, right? To exuberance of consumption of technology and brightness, right? To many other things, but in a way that's not nostalgic or romantic. It's not about, oh, let's prefer nature over culture, let's prefer country over city, which is a cliche that a lot of messages are driven, right? In your case, there's a scientific um, backbone to those messaging, which I think it's very crucial to think about. So how do you situate your work in that context of environmental concerns?
Well, that's like the edge of that. We've been mentioned in a couple of talks before with guests from the Natural History Museum in Paris as well. We need the cities. We need the cities. The thing is, what can we do? What can we do to keep life as we want? Keep the achievements we achieved, and also respect that. I mean, what we really need from what we are using, and how to limit the overuse, and how to not abuse something to not over abuse or abuse. So I see my work as light pollution is a topic that is unfortunately the less spoken between the other environmental issues, and because it's so less spoken, I find that voice I'm trying to raise as fundamental to let the people a bit understand more about the problem. I'm not an activist, but I do care about where we live. I do think that each one of us is an activist, and if you do an action, whenever if it's a little action or a bigger action, dedicate some time and thought, we can already create the change. And I discovered light pollution through my work. That's not something that I was exposed by reading an article on the environment issues. So I feel that the dedication of this exhibition to light pollution as the main target of the exhibition is something that, and it's something that I could do years before, because for years I'm working with the invisible and looking for a not polluted sky, a not polluted environment, not light polluted environment, or light pollution free. But this is the first time that I understood that I have to put it in the first row, and that's where I feel the contribution of the exhibition to the environment is coming strongly, and it's also with the umbrella of the Ministry of Ecology of Italy that gave its I would say support. I do understand that that's something that also on the level of state and politics there is more and more understanding that this should be something that need to go through a change.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think thank you for the thoughts about light pollution and how you discover it through your work. But it's also interesting that you also brought Italy into the picture, right? Which is where you are, which is where the exhibition is. And it's interesting because
Sicily,
Italy,
which is
Sicily,
Sicily. It's been years. I always thought about, even when you are in Sicily. Sorry for like open a parenthesis. I will give you the microphone right away. I mean, walking on an island, it seems like you are totally protected from light pollution. You are on an island. The idea behind being on an island is being like. Totally isolated. But no, also Sicily is suffering from the same issues wherever there are population and villages, cities. The use that the people and the cities are doing with light is a bit exaggerated. And of course, this is coming from maybe, I mean, the book that's speaking about the West and the Industrial Revolution and the possibilities that all this gave to the people. And then since then, we're getting more and more spoiled in winning the nature. At the end, we are losing the nature and not winning anything. And that habits arrived also to the islands. And being on an island, saying Italy, and I will let you continue, is for me a symbolic place to raise the voice on light pollution, because there is not anymore isolation.
yeah, absolutely. And I think your work speaks to that quite wonderfully. The idea that, there are beauty, there are awareness within a place that are not bright, sometimes dark. Human have intrinsic fear of darkness because it talked about danger, it talked about things that, because, we saw eyes driven, right? So when we don't have light, we cannot see. It means danger, it means risk
Unknown.
and other things around to it. So I think that's something that we definitely uh, can care for. And I think this is, in it's interesting too because in many areas that I worked in, I think all over the world, specific neighborhoods that have light control, right? There are criteria or regulations that you cannot uplight a tree, for example, right? All the light have to point down, and it has a specific amount of lux or candle that you allowed to use on not only just on the architecture but also on the landscape. And I think that started to kind of create that sense of what's the right balance for safety and the sense of really maintaining the environment, right? A lot of freeways and expressways in America are actually not illuminated at all. There's no light that shines down on the car, so we're relying heavily on the headlights of cars and things like that, like what you see in movies. And that also have to do with animals. It also have to do with people that live around and the sense of place of those places. So I think on the countryside or rural aspect, I think people are more and more paying attention to not letting light pollution be a problem in that sense. I think the more difficult question is in the more urban context, right? How do we work on that? Now we're not only dealing with just illumination, we're also dealing with advertisement, billboards, many other things that happens to cities. I mean, of course, we talked about Times Square, right? Or even all the Japanese and the Asian cities with all the billboards that just look like there's there's no night. It becomes using the black background of the night as a canvas to paint on these neons onto it. So I think it was a kind of
Beautiful
a race
description.
against that, which is getting interesting. I mean, at least for places like Paris, I think there's a very clear direction about there's no billboard, there's no illuminated more than X, Y, and Z. So the overall tone of the city is roughly similar. Only in some areas further out, maybe out of the historic center, that you can have billboard, you can have neon, and many other things. But now, for lack of a better word, now the Eiffel Tower, has become its own object, right? It was quite fine, and now every hour it does its own dancing and lightings and
Yeah.
things like that. So it's kind of negating that aspect that darkness or shadow should be celebrated. I think it only happened once every hour, but then we already looking that as the celebration, right? So we prefer light over darkness again. So on that note, it's interesting because how do we? Maybe as an artist, maybe I asked you, how do you think we could balance that? Because art create values and art create preferences, right? It create cultural language that then define what people live by, way of life. And so our way of life is now driving us towards the shiny, the bright, the illuminated, the bombardment of medias and other things, not to mention our phones. But how
Yeah,
can you
somebody
use?
told me, by the way, the phones, it sounds like a joke, but we are like, I don't know, 7 billion altogether, maybe 8.
Yes.
Each one of us, let's say, uh, grosso modo, no? Each one of us has a phone, which is lighting up when we turn it on. In the same moment, let's say half of us are using phones which are at the end like a torch. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like constantly 3 billions, 4 billions torches lighting the sky. This is
Exactly.
like,
Well,
it's insane.
one if you go to a concert, right, that have let's say 50,000, 60,000 people, when everyone use their phone, immediately understand the impact of that. So in your work, how do you use your work to make people aware of the other side, to make people aware of the effect of light pollution? What and in your work you have a lot of science into it as well. So how do you bring this on? I mean, what's the intention?
Well, it's a 360 thing. First, I'm creating my work in darkness to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's hard to bring somebody to the museum. It's not easy to bring public to museums. But once the public reach out the content of the show, whether it's on an article or if the public is curious enough, would come and see the exhibition, he will get inspired by first the possibilities the darkness gives. It's not like everything should be with. I mean, if you look it as inspiration, and so the possibilities the dark is giving. I mean, you can do so much in dark, and then you would study about what is the effect of light pollution, a term that most of the people that stepped in, including whoever was involved in the production, they never knew what is light pollution, which is, you know, it's not shocking. I didn't know about light pollution a few years ago. And so then the awareness of that problem and what the impact of light pollution on our life, and then what we are doing right now. I mean, the public program that I designed is all related to the topic. So I hope we have as many viewers as possible, and this would stay then online on the foundation's YouTube channel, and people can re-watch it or just watch it. And if they
Mm-hmm.
miss
Mm-hmm.
if they miss the streaming, so you know what an artist can do is just doing it, believing in it, and let the people make their choices to come and see and get inspired and get knowledge, and then social network would do its way to more and more people, as more people would share what they experienced, would speak about the problem. That's something that would, at the end, even I tried to bring schools to the exhibition and younger generation students, because I do know that it's very hard to change the habits of an adult, and in many cases happens that the younger generation is changing the habits of the older one.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they would speak about that at home, and then who knows who came to see my show? It can be a son of an important politician in the government of Canada, who came here for a weekend and saw the exhibition. I had a group of students from all over Europe that's studying biodiversity. Who knows who are they in contact with? They go back to Finland, to Spain, to I mean, they were like from 10 different countries, and then this is like an initiative that can grow, and I hope things will change. We cannot do more than we do. I mean, it's a responsibility of all of us. I mean, to separate garbage and a clean city is not only because the city is having a very big department of cleaners. It also depends on if the people are not throwing the garbage on the floor instead of in the garbage can. So it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility of each one of us, but also of the institution. So yeah, the art is here to speak it out and to inspire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think that's very helpful because, of course, art is the portal, right, through which you go through. And I'm glad that younger people can. I mean, because it's in a way, art should not give the answer. Art is an invitation to ponder,
Totally.
and people can then think about it, and the invitation can be soft or hard or strong, but I think it's that invitation to or engagement to imagine or to ponder, and I think your work definitely has done that because it present reality in a different way that funny. I mean, maybe my last question to you, because when I remember seeing your work for the first time, right, and I think that it for some weird reason it reminded me of what maybe animals would see landscape, right? Because animals are
Nature see nature.
yeah, I was kind of very fascinated with the idea that we think we see the same thing, but we don't, right? Our eyes and our sensory systems are made so different that we point to the green color, we think this, we see the green color, we actually don't. At the same time, we are aware that we're surrounded with animals and other things who do not see exactly the same way we see at all. Dark, or they see black and white or monotone. And many in your landscape, you have wolves, you have deers, you have many other rabbits and many other animals that live, and that's the habitat that we're kind of going into, right? So when I see your pictures, it reminded me, oh, that might be something that's similar. If we can see what they see, that might look like that. I don't know. I mean, there's a sense of empathy or the sense of putting yourself in someone's shoes to understand the world from that perspective. And of course, with light pollution, it ruined the way to see the world. The balance of life from the animal kingdom is another story that we just did so much to them. Not only eating them, but also, allow make it very almost impossible for them to continue their life as they have been. So, I mean, what do you think about that? What do you think about animals and the whole ecosystem in the context of creating your work?
Well, that's funny because I think my reply to you, which is something that repeats when somebody asks me what you are like a cat or you are like, I don't know, a wolf, is that I'm very curious myself what animals are seeing, and also what do they use as a source of light? For my point of view, the source of light in my artworks is the light which is in the material, which is the inner light. It's the inside out. It's not illumination. It's a glow. Maybe they use that. Maybe they see more than a physical light. Maybe they have an access to things that we don't have. That's something that I was always curious to discover, and I want to return to you with a question about Tanizaki. That what do you think, if Tanizaki wrote that in 1933? What do you think would he feel today? Because in 1933, I think Paris was still used those lamps in Montmartre, which like using flame,
Oh, a gas lamp, yeah.
A gas lamp. So, I mean, in 1933, around that, maybe slightly later, Van Gogh painted from sitting in a coffee, he painted the sky with stars. You could still see from the city the stars, what now is even hard to see when you are leaving the city further, like even 20, 30, 40 kilometers. So what Stanislavski, the writer of In Price of Shadows, would feel today?
Well, I think it's interesting because, again, when I first read that book, right, I read it in the late 80s, which is 50 years before after he wrote it. I felt it was, to play devil's advocate, almost like an angry letter from an old generation. Right, because the shock of the news always anger and disturb the older generation, right? So I felt that it was very counter progress, counter change, which happened all the time, But he is not a conservative. He's not trying to say change is not good. He's just saying like let's look at what change affected us. Don't only look at the good side, let's look at the negative side it brings as well, and how are we dealing with that. I think he's wanting us to balance that. Like, for example, he was talking about one of the examples in the book is about the fountain pen, right? The fountain pen, which is, he talked about how static and rigid the fountain pen is, which is a Western tool, which he compared to the brushes with ink, right? The fountain pen doesn't allow you to have the flexibility and the nimbleness of calligraphy. Of course, fountain pen has its own calligraphy tradition, but the tradition of pen-based calligraphy, fountain pen cannot do, right? So he was talking about the loss of calligraphy in the Japanese context if we completely lost the brush and go 100% on the fountain pen, which he's seeing more and more people were adapting, because at the time fountain pen was seen as the prestige, right? Everyone have a Mont Blanc, everyone have a expensive stuff. So he was reacting to that as well. But what he was suggesting is like maybe we can combine the two. Maybe why don't we combine the ready ink within it with a brush, so that we can still maintain the flexibility of the brush with the convenience of a fountain pen, with the reservoir of ink, which now, if you go to Japan, such a thing exists.
Yeah,
right. So
totally.
you have a pen brush that happens. So I think that he would
also for single use, those ones that you just use when they get dry.
Oh, the cartridge. Yeah. No, but I think, but instead of the fountain pen, instead of the nib, which is the metal fountain pen nib,
brush.
With a brush, right? So I think that was something that come out of that asking that he asked in 1930s, but it come into realization in maybe 1990s, right? Because the market need to be there. So in that sense, I felt that such voices are crucial, because it's not this over that. It's not like I don't like this, I want that. It's more like I think change is inevitable. Progress is important. Light is important. But let's look at what we're missing by preferring and using only one over the other. Can we find a solution that allow us to maintain our way of life and our aesthetic, our art form that come with the last tool,
change
into
over
the new tool?
sustainability, as you wrote me before.
Exactly. So therefore, I think back to your question, I think if he's there today, he would, he was juggling a few balls. Now we have so many balls in the air that we try to juggle, right? How we deal with virtual reality, how do we deal with, light, how do we deal with, nuclear bomb. And all of these things are around us. And the more we advance, the more powerful the tools are. So now we need to really find a middle ground or a balance that allow us to maintain our way of life or enhance it, but then also make sure that the tools don't control us. So I think that would be something that he definitely want us to think about.
Beautiful reply. Beautiful reply. Well, it's also a beautiful tone to wrap our time together, Michel.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Thank you. It's also a beautiful way to wrap our time together here.
Exactly.
As I promised you, I know you have meetings right after, so thank you so much, Kulapat.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon, Rafael, and thank you for this.
I hope to see you soon. If there is like a possibility that the show would extend, we're going to see this in the next couple of days, and that brings the possibility that you will see the show maybe in July.
I would love that.
Around here. And I would love you to see that. Finger crossed, and can't wait to see you, whether here in Palermo or, anywhere else soon, probably in Paris.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for accepting the invitation and being here and dedicate time and thought and your knowledge and your spirit and your love. And I love you and thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Kulapat.